Well, hey there, Soul Crew. The brief is in, a 10-minute guide to bass. It promises to be a real roller coaster of emotion, so why not strap in as we begin Rocket's medium shabby guide to bass. So at this stage you might be wondering, what do I need to participate in this workshop? Nothing at all, strictly speaking. If you can lay your hands on a bass, that's probably going to be pretty handy. A guitar could also be a really suitable substitute. Just ignore the thinnest two strings and you'll be in the ballpark. Things like ukuleles and banjos are not so useful because they use different tuning intervals between the strings. And to be honest, if you've got a banjo at your house, you may well have bigger problems than learning the bass right now anyway. Next thing that's going to be handy is a tuner. I think it's really important for bass players to be in tune from the outset, and certainly it can be quite hard to hear down in those low regions if you're trying to tune by ear, so a tuner is very handy. You can get apps for your phone, but be aware that some of those are fairly rubbish, so certainly test the app out and make sure it's telling the truth before you start using it in anger. The next thing that's handy is a strap. If you don't have one of those, you can certainly play sitting down. Eventually, though, you're probably going to want to be able to string that thing around your neck, so yeah, certainly keep an eye out for a strap if you can one of those. An amplifier, if you have it, is going to be mighty useful. It'll make your journey a lot more fun, but the bass will make enough noise playing unplugged if you're in a quiet environment, so yeah, certainly an amp is not essential. If you do have an amp, you then will need an instrument cable to go from the bass to the amplifier, otherwise the amp will do little to assist you. Okay, so now I've got the bass mounted up on the strap, and I'm trying to adjust the height to get my wrist fairly straight through here, and then this hand fairly straight through here. It's a bit hard to achieve if you're seated, but yeah, certainly do the best you can for comfort. When you're staring at your bass, you're going to need to find the output socket, which is where you'll plug the cable into it. It'll typically have a couple of knobs on there for control as well. Work out which one of those is the volume control. Sometimes there might even be two volume controls, one for each of the two pickups. When you're starting out, just turn any volume controls you can find all the way up. There'll typically also be some sort of tone knob. I tend to turn that all the way up as well for the brightest possible tone when you're starting out. If you've got any switches on there, they can be a real mystery, so just flick them until stuff sounds good and you'll be off and rolling. For this workshop, we're going to assume we're dealing with a right-handed 4-string bass guitar, which is certainly the most common instrument you'll find out there in the wild. If you're a left-hander starting out, I would seriously consider learning bass right-handed, because left-handed basses are rarer than pasta, so you may make your life a fair bit easier. In the videos, I'm actually playing a 5-string because my 4-string is socially isolated at a friend's house. So just you can ignore the thickest string there. It's a low B, which won't be on the 4-string diagrams that we've got throughout. Speaking of diagrams, so the first one up is just a picture of a piano keyboard, just showing the note names. The white notes are really simple. The black notes are a little bit tricky. They can have two different names depending on what key you're in. Next up, we move that information onto a picture of a bass fretboard, and this is sort of from the perspective looking down, and you'll see essentially the open tunings for each of the strings, E, A, D, and G, and then the effect of putting down a finger on the fret. Now, when you're fretting, you want to try and put your finger right where I've positioned those dots next to the fret, rather than in the middle. If you put it in the middle, you might get some nasty buzzing sounds, so yeah, get it right near the metal. All right, it's right hand time. And what we want to see here is the first two fingers on the right hand are doing all the work. And we want to see the finger plucking the string and then coming to rest on the string, I guess, next to the one that we're actually trying to get a noise out of. So if I come off this string here, I come to rest on the next one across there. And we're going to do that with the first two fingers, and they alternate. They sort of walk along in that sort of motion, each time coming to rest on the one next to it. And that's really important. It cleans up the playing because we don't want multiple strings ringing when we first start playing. We want to mute them up and just have one making noise at a time. All right, so moving now to the left hand. And in the left hand, we've got our thumb positioned on sort of the top of the ridge on the back of the neck. Everything sort of can pivot around there. And we have all 4 fingers ideally in action in the left hand. If your hand's are little, it might be just that you're going to use 3 fingers, but certainly if you can get the little finger into play, it's pretty handy. And generally what I encourage when you're first starting out is that each finger looks after the action for one fret. And so first finger will be looking after the action along there, second finger, and so on. And so we space ourselves out across 4 frets. If I now get our right hand doing the little walking trick that we've worked on, we can then move our way. And then moving to a different string. And the benefit of this is that from one position, as it's known, we've got access to quite a lot of notes. In fact, we can play more than an entire octave of the scale without needing to move our hand up or down the neck in either direction. So if I just work my way through the notes like this. And we've actually got more range than that, but that's certainly enough for us to get into some mischief when we're starting out.
All right, so now we've reached the point where it's time to bring it all together. We've got our friendly drummer laying down a drum beat in 4/4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And our objective on bass initially is to just try and land the root note of each chord on beat 1 of each of the bars. And you'll see on your screen there, you've got the notes in question. We're going to need a C, an F, a G, and then also the D, and it says D minor. When we're first starting on a bass, don't worry too much about the minor bit. That will become important later on. But yeah, initially just you're going to be playing the D there. So yeah, beat 1, and let's drop in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you might have noticed that the final chord actually occurs a little bit late. So what we're going to do now is adjust our bass note on that 4th chord so that it now drops on the 2nd beat to line up with what the rest of the band's doing. That's a pretty important role that bass players to listen to what's going on and adapt to it as well. So here we go now with the 4th chord dropping on beat 2 rather than beat 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, So now the time comes to try and introduce that 2nd note per bar that we talked about. And this is usually one that we place to try and emphasize the groove and also to give us a little bit of control over tempo if the drummer is wandering around at all. The main thing is once you pick a spot for that 2nd note, it's a good idea to try and be fairly consistent so that people, particularly the drummer, know where that note's going to be occurring. Here we go. Okay, so that's certainly one idea there, and what we'll now do is I'll just roll the drum beat plus those chords for a bit, and yeah, feel free to experiment. You can obviously revisit this after you've watched the video. So there you have it, Rocket's medium shabby guide to bass. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for watching, and hope to see you out there.